I want more information on F-body torque arms. Kevin, I've watched your first video. I seen the F-body mistake video at the shop. Can you go over a little more detail and focus specifically on slicks for F-body and what kind of options do we have, and a little bit more about the principles and torque arm and the anti-squat line? Hey, welcome back to Kevin Wilson SBC. I'm excited about talking about F-body torque arm suspension part 2. I have been flooded with requests for F-body torque arms. So I thought the first video and the second F-body video, I kind of thought that covered it. But I want to go into a little more detail, be a little more prescriptive about F-body torque arms, anti-squat line, center of gravity, and what you can do for all-out drag racing with slicks. Remember, I'm not so interested in talking about street. I'm focused on drag racing. So please don't come to me with rubber bushings and stock torque arm locations. I'm gonna talk about that, but to make the torque arm work for your drag car, you have to make some changes. So let's talk about those changes, why those changes are important, and how they relate to the anti-squat line and how they relate to the center of gravity. Let's get started on the F-body torque arm suspension. You try saying that. Talking more about F-body torque horsepower and torque arm suspension. Okay, let's lay down some groundwork on what I have drawn out here. First off, this line is the anti-squat line for this example. It is not to scale. This is reference only. Here we have my crude representation of a center section with the axle tubes and the torque arm coming off of the center section. These represent the lower control arm on a torque arm suspension. This is going to represent our center of gravity. I highly recommend you watch the video I just released on the instant center location with regard to the center of gravity and anti-squat line. All of these videos and a lot more information are always included in the description of my YouTube videos. I understand that some platforms it's hard to read the description, but I would encourage you to get on your browser, your laptop, Windows or MacBook or whatever, and go read the description. I have links in there. I have some pretty good information in there that goes along with every video. White center of gravity, yellow is my torque arm mounting location, and red is going to be my lower control arm. Take a look at this picture and let's draw a line from here to here. I can't draw a straight line to save my life, guys, so bear with me. I'm not an artiste. Take a look at this picture and let's ignore the red. Let's focus on what is called the torque arm. What does this look very similar to? This looks very similar to a ladder bar. Now there's some very distinct differences between a torque arm and a ladder bar. One very obvious difference are the locations of the top and bottom bar in relation to the center line of your axle. In a true ladder bar setup, let's say this is your center line of your axle. and you got your housing. In a true ladder bar setup, your bottom bar is generally 7 to 10 inches below the axle center line. And your top bar is probably about 3 to 3.5 inches above the axle center line. And then of course you have bracing and adjusters and all that. Now in this torque arm picture, I have not drawn on here the heim joint adjustments that you're generally going to have with aftermarket drag race torque arms. But if you notice, these look very similar. However, the geometry is very different. This ladder bar is going to introduce a bunch of anti-squat, as short as it is, and depending on where you have it mounted in the chassis holes. Let's just say this one has 3. Most ladder bars we work on have 5 holes, 3 to 5 holes. From the factory on the F body, GM did not build this with drag racing in mind. I've talked about this in the first video. Other YouTubers have talked about this, and we say a lot of the same things because that's what it is. They built this more to have a neutral tendency on the chassis. My drawing has it way above the anti-squat line, but in essence, this is not a factory torque arm. The factory torque arm comes actually very far up here, very close to the center of gravity. It mounts on the back of the transmission mount. It's a very long torque arm, and in essence, this line is actually very close to this. This is not to scale, okay? But a factory torque arm is very long, and that creates very little anti-squat, positive or negative. So very little separation on the rear end and very little squat on the rear end. And when this rear end twists and the tire begins to drive, the natural tendency of this rear end is to try to drive forward. And whenever you have the twisting of the rear end, this lower control arm is really being pushed onto the chassis. This is a chassis mount. So let me move this out of the way. This is the lower control arm chassis mount. This is attached to the chassis. This is attached to the chassis in this drawing. The factory torque arm is attached to the transmission cross member. Let's forget about the factory torque arm. If you're wanting to drag race your factory torque arm, let's cover that. You have an F body. You want to leave the factory torque arm in place, and you want to go drag racing. Kevin, what do I do? Simple. Lower control arm relocation brackets are your friend. You want to leave the stock torque arm in. It's not what I recommend, but you want to leave the stock torque arm in, and you want to drag race your car. You want to put some 28 or 29 slicks on it, and you want to go have some fun on a Friday or Saturday night at the track. Your options then are lower control arm relocation brackets, which is what this is. This is your lower control arm relocation bracket. I highly, 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 highly recommend weld-on brackets. If you're going to use bolt-on, bolt them on and then have somebody put a bead of weld around them, please. And what you want to do is you want to get these relocation brackets, because generally you're going to be around here on a stock mount, okay? Generally this is where you're going to be, and you're going to be up here. And because you're drag racing this car, you've introduced a downward angle to the factory location. A factory F-body doesn't have 3 options. This is so I can show you what's going on. So let's make this simple. Let's make this simple. Let's erase this. Let's erase this. Are you guys happy I'm back on the chalkboard? I've had a lot of people say, man, get back on the chalkboard. Get back on the chalkboard. All right, so this is our stock GM location for the lower control arm. Right there. We've lowered the vehicle because we want to have a cool stance. Well, because we've lowered the vehicle, we've lowered this chassis point, and we've lowered this chassis point. This up here has come down a little bit, but this has come down a lot more because we all like to lower the rear of the car and the front of the car to get the cool stance, which helps lower the center of gravity, which absolutely helps launch a drag car. Absolutely. I had a comment on a video a year or so ago where a guy wanted to argue with me and tell me the center of gravity has no impact on launching a drag car. That's baloney. It absolutely does. We got this situation going on. You want to keep the factory stock torque arm. You have one option: weld on lower control arm relocation brackets, which are going to give you much lower mount points on the rear end. And if it were me with a stock torque arm, I would be considering this, depending on your power levels, okay? Depending on your power levels. Let's say this is a 650 horsepower, naturally aspirated street car. You want to have some fun. 28s or 29s. I would bring the bar, my lower control arm bar. Now, this will be an aftermarket bar. Guys, please don't try to run rubber bushings in this stuff and go to the drag strip. Please get an aftermarket arm. I'm going to show you products at the end of this video that I highly recommend that you go source. The aftermarket lower control arm is going to have heim joints, solid mount, and they're going to be adjustable. And I would go from the bottom hole here to the stock location there. What I just did is I changed the push reaction to the chassis. Remember, this is mounted to your chassis. This is mounted to the transmission cross member pivot. So this is really very neutral. The stock location, really very neutral. No anti-squat, no squat, okay? So really the only thing you have to help plant the slick is this lower control arm. And you need to get this control arm going uphill to the chassis because you're trying to push the chassis up. When you push the chassis up, this rear end axle is going to go down and your slick is going to be planted to the surface, to the track, to the street. The push is pushing, remember you got rear end twist here, the push of this bottom bar is lifting the chassis, which is driving the axle towards the track. Please stop and let's think about that. If I have a downward bar angle, what's that force going to do to the chassis? It's going to drive the chassis towards the ground and create squat. If you want to run a big tire torque arm, then you really need to get this bottom bar more level or just a tad up. But for a small tire, 650, 750 horsepower with tubes, I'm going to want this bottom bar angled up. Now that's for a stock GM torque arm, lower control arm modification. Now let's go a step further. Let's go full race.
Let's go full race.
Full race F-body torque arm. We're going to rip out the GM torque arm. We're going to go outside. We're going to find a metal bin and we're going to throw it away. They're flimsy. They bend. They're not made for drag racing. We need to look at an aftermarket shorter torque arm with a dedicated mount that's going to be much further back in the car than the factory GM torque arm. And it's going to have all heim joints. I'm going to be able to put my pinion angle exactly where I want it, which in a full race heim joint situation, probably going to start around 2.5 to 3 degrees of pinion angle for an F-body. I'm going to have an anti-roll bar installed in the back. I have people message me, hey Kevin, got a leaf spring car, do you think I need an anti-roll bar? Yes. Hey Kevin, I got a ladder bar suspension. I've been on Yellow Bullet and Drag Race Suspension on Facebook. I got a lot of guys telling me I don't need a anti-roll bar with ladder bars. You do. You do.
You do.
An anti-roll bar, I don't care if you have a homemade, homegrown, I don't care what's the rear suspension, an anti-roll bar is your friend, because a motor is going to torque a chassis and it's going to take the left front up, which drives the right rear down, which brings the left rear up and the right front down. An anti-roll bar in the rear is going to help correct that and give you the ability to not have all this chassis roll and drive your car all over the track because of the rear end and because your front end alignment is all out of whack. God knows what's going on with your toe end and your steering wheel. I mean, it's just a mess. So I'm going to have an anti-roll bar, an aftermarket chrome moly, strong heim joint, shorter torque arm, and I'm definitely going to have some well-done relocation brackets where I can get this bottom bar angle where I need it. And as I increase power and as I increase the hit, I can relax this angle and bring it up. An F-body, you get the anti-squat line for an F-body the same way you get an anti-squat line for 4-link, ladder bar, leaf spring. The anti-squat line is the chassis position, reference position. It's not hard and fast. It gives you a line of reference whereby you can make changes after testing and watching video. You have a line of reference whereby you can make educated and targeted changes. This anti-squat line doesn't care if this is a torque arm, ladder bar, 4-link, leaf spring. It doesn't care. You calculate the anti-squat line the same way. And you start at the center of the wheel where the slick or tire meets the track. And you draw a straight line, which I did not do very well. And you intersect out here at the center line of your front spindle at the height of this center of gravity. Now, I have a video that explains how to find your center of gravity in relation to wheelbase, and that same video shows you how to find the center of gravity height. It just depends on how specific you want to get. So what a lot of us do, because this is not hard and fast. Let me say that again. Unless you take the time to find the height of your center of gravity, finding the center of gravity forward to rear is easy. Front weights, rear weights, and it's a percentage. That's easy. Finding the height is not as easy. And I have a video in the description that tells you how to find it. But what we do a lot of times, because the anti-squat line is a reference point, we use the center line of the camshaft as the height. And that generally will get you in the ballpark. And this is why this anti-squat line is not 100%. I can tell you right now that you can have an instant center probably right here based on the drawing I have, and it's still separating the rear. For that matter, that right there will probably still separating the rear. It's a reference though. I know how many inches I'm down from that, and if I see separation and I'm still crushing the sidewall, I know I need to do probably two things. One, well actually one thing really. One, lengthen it. I can keep the same height and lengthen it, but because I lengthen it, I got more distance away. Okay, now previous video, that's perfect. If the anti-squat line is perfect, if you took the time to find the height of your center of gravity and everything else, and you took the time to draw this out, then you would have a pretty accurate anti-squat line. But F-body, you find the anti-squat line the same way we find the anti-squat line for any car. Then these points begin to take on a different meaning. I see a lot of guys try to draw a line from here through these 2 points. And actually, that's not a bad reference. That doesn't mean that's your instant center. What that's giving you, though, is a percentage of rise. So if I were, let me show you, if I were to do this, I can calculate the distance from this intersect to the anti-squat line. That's called percentage of rise with ladder bars. With a ladder bar, you don't really do an instant center. You have a pickup point. You don't really do instant center with ladder bars, you do percentage of rise. This is kind of giving you the same thing here. It's very interesting. But remember, stock, this is really doing nothing. Now, we've shortened this a bunch. And a general rule of thumb is from here to here, 32, 36 inches. Golly, guys, that's sounding more and more like a ladder bar. Now, we don't have our geometry still. We're still, you know, we're backwards. We got the bottom bar close to the center line. We got the top bar far away. Okay. However, because I've got this shorter, and with the aftermarket brackets, I can move this up. I can move this down. There are brackets that allow me to come down further than this. And now I've got that. Now I am driving the chassis forward here. Remember, this is twisting, but it's really kind of neutral. But shorter is going to allow it to exert more force on the chassis. But now I'm going to go more extreme on my lower control arm and get that. Now I'm really acting on the chassis way behind the center of gravity, which is definitely going to create plant. If I need to soften the hit, I'm going to bring this mount point down, and I'm going to bring this bar up. If it were me, and you came to me and said, hey Kevin, where do I start? Where would you start? I've got an aftermarket TRZ torque arm, or I got a Umi short torque arm with their cross member, or Midwest Performance. I'm going to show you all these at the end. A lot of you guys, I see a lot of you guys don't stick around to the end. I have a lot of nuggets at the end of my videos. You should stick around. You know, Kevin, I've went out, I've got all this stuff, got it fabricated, I got it installed. I'm running a 28, 29 tire, or a big tire for that matter, but it's a slick, it's not a radial, it's not a hard tire. Where would you start? I would start in the middle of the bracket, the cross member that comes with your aftermarket torque arm, and I would have this bottom bar level. Why? Wait a minute now, Kevin, you just talked about all this trouble to be able to lower this mount point and get some uphill angle. Yeah, I did. But we're not running a radial in this video. We're talking about slicks. And the fact alone that I greatly shortened this torque arm is going to absolutely create some dynamic of sending this rear end towards the ground, towards the track, which is going to plant the sidewall more. It's still kind of neutral, but not as neutral as here, so it's actually starting to have some reaction on the rear end, as short as it is. So I don't need as much help pushing up on the chassis. I want to use this drive to push the chassis forward and have more energy taking the car forward. If you blow the tires off on the hit and you're on a prep track, okay, let's bring this down. Let's reconfirm 2.5 to 3 degrees of pinion angle. Remember, all Heim joints everywhere, no rubber anywhere, no flexing anywhere, chrome moly, good stuff. Good stuff. 2.5 to 3 degrees of pinion angle. You need to confirm that with your drive shaft, but pinion angle is only to get the U-joint straight on the hit and through the run. That's it. That's it. You don't need more than that, because all you're going to do is tear up U-joints and lose momentum, because you're not driving the pinion and the drive shaft in a one-to-one when you got a bent angle like that. You don't believe me? Test it. You're losing rotational efficiency if your drive shaft and pinion are not in line on the hit, and you're not putting as much power as you could through the rear end to the tire. That's a fact. That is an absolute fact. That's where I would start neutral. I would start neutral because it's not neutral. With the shorter bar and stronger bars and Heim joints, it's going to separate. And you may actually have to keep tuning this. You may have to put a little bit of dig in it to not kill the slick. Guys, I hope this is making sense. This is so cool. This stuff works. And you get to keep your F-body suspension. And you can tell everybody, I just outran your butt. I just outran your 4-link. I just outran your ladder bar with my F-body torque arm, dude. Go pound sand. This stuff works. Let's go over some product that I think you should heavily consider, and I'm going to give you specific things that you should go look at. Let's do that. The very first product I want to show you is an absolute must. We talked about it in every scenario. Stock torque arm, aftermarket torque arm. Lower control arm relocation brackets. These are from TRZ. I have personally worked on many customer cars with these exact brackets. They're strong. You have lots of adjustability, and they work. Let me show you a pair of bolt-on lower control arm relocation brackets from Umi Performance. These are bolt-on, but I'm going to tell you this right now. Bolt them on all day long. Have somebody put a bead of weld around both sides. Please, guys, please. Remember, this lower control arm is really what's pushing on the chassis. But this lower control arm is really trying to compress. Please weld these on. Now, I'm going to show you something kind of cool. This is from Umi Performance. And I didn't talk about this in the video, but my gosh, I really hope this is a given. But subframe connectors, guys, are a must. Kind of like an anti-roll bar on the rear. Subframe connectors on an F-body, you gotta have them. You just gotta have them. Please. But check this out. Here's a very cool kit from Umi that includes the subframe connectors and the cross member with a shorter torque arm, with Heim joints, with adjustability, and it's all solid mounted. Oh my gosh. You got a whole kit right here in your hand. All you need is some lower control arm relocation brackets and you're all set. Let's go to this one next. Midwest chassis. two-piece race torque arm, short or long version. Guess which one I'm gonna pick? Well, I shouldn't say that. Depends on the chassis, wheelbase, center of gravity. In fairness, it depends on a lot of stuff. Shorter is not always better, but torque arms, they give you two choices. Go to Midwest Chassis, look at their website, look at the links. You need to determine which link is right for you, which length is right for you. But this is a very strong, solid mount, two-piece torque arm. I would recommend you take a look at that. Okay, this next one is one I think I like the most. And I've had a couple customer cars in the shop running this setup, and I am extremely impressed with the workmanship, the quality, and how strong these components are. This is the SPOHN Pro Series torque arm with cross member. And guys, this is a beautiful piece. And of course, we're not going to do poly bushings. We're definitely going to do spherical rod ends or Del Sphere rod ends. But take a look at these pictures. Take a look at how strong this is. Look at how strong the mount is. This relocates your mount from the transmission mount to a dedicated mount. But this is a beautiful, beautiful torque arm setup with cross member. And I've got all of this down in the description. I got every part I just showed, and I'm gonna put more links down below for other torque arm stuff. And with the SPOHN stuff, he actually has some YouTube videos himself going over why his product is different than the other products. That is all going to be in the description. But to me, at that point, you're stepping up the game. If you want to stay torque arm, then that's where I would be looking. Lower control arm relocation brackets, drag race Pro Series, shorter torque arms with dedicated cross members. Those are the keys on the F-body side. You can make the decision to leave the torque arm, and TRZ has a ladder bar setup. And you can replace the torque arms and go with these ladder bar setups, but now you've left everything and you're changing the suspension. Some very cool products. I'm not affiliated with TRZ Motorsports, with UMI, with BMI, with Midwest Chassis. I'm not affiliated with anybody but my dad and Penske shocks. And the only affiliation with Penske shocks is if I were to go to Penske and order and design the shocks for you, then I get a little bit of money off. But I just am so busy. I would rather you go to Jerry at Penske, tell him Kevin Wilson sent you, and I can promise you this, Jerry will take care of you. That entire Penske team will take care of you. AFCO makes a very good shock. I love the big guns. I think AFCO quality is good. I'm gonna do a video here soon on Santuff. I think Santuff makes an amazing shock. Guys, there are, you got Afterworks that modify the Viking shocks. If I was gonna run a Viking shocks, I would be talking to Afterworks. I'm not affiliated with them. The QA1 shocks are very strong. The Mod Series shocks, I would run a Mod Series shock. I would not run a DD shock for anything above 600 horsepower on the track. Mincer, obviously, is kind of like the cream of the crop. You will not go wrong ever working with Mincer. Oh, Kevin, my gosh, man, shocks are so expensive. What do you want? It's kind of like putting a stock crankshaft and stock rods in a 1500 horsepower motor. It's going to bite you. You got a lot of good companies out there. Me personally, Penske saved the 48 Ford. The geometry on the 48 Ford is so different and the center of gravity is so high. Jerry sat down with me and we designed a valving on the extension, rebound and extension, and the compression. And guys, I can tell you this, they absolutely work, 100%. In the 48 Ford at 3,500 pounds, around 1,200 horsepower, and me nailing that thing with a turbo 400 248 gear and a 389, Those shocks held that car and it worked. 119/60 foot leaving off an idle. You have so many people say, man, trans brake that thing. If I had a power glide, I'd have been trans braking it. And in my Turbo 400, I can't leave on trans brake in second gear. The 248 first gear was just too violent. Run some good shocks on your F-body suspension. If you want some suggestions, I do remote suspension tuning. We can do email, or we can do email and a phone call. All of my packages are on my website. All of my services are listed. I am getting so many requests. I cannot keep up. The only way I can prioritize the work is if people who are willing to pay, I put them at the top of the list. And when I get finished with all the paying customers, I have a list of people who have requested help by date, and I start going down the list. But the minute someone pays for my services, I stop and I go to the paid and I get done with them. Guys, and I'm not getting rich on this stuff. It takes me hours to go through and document and write back and give suggestions. I just don't have a better way to organize it. Hey, I'm done. F-body part 2. I hope this was cool. I hope this helped provide a little more value than the other videos and build on that. Remember, trying to do 3 things. We're trying to go fast, we're trying to go straight, and we're trying to be safe. Good night, guys.